Good evening, guys and gals. Welcome to Empire Men. This is the technology section. I am Dave. This evening, we've got something interesting for you guys to take a look at. It's the latest and greatest Lenovo, the Y700 gaming laptop. Alright, so really where to begin with this machine? It is Lenovo's latest offering. It's new to the Australian and New Zealand market. I don't have a price on it yet. I suspect it's going to be between $2,500 and $3,500 depending on how you spec it out when you shop online for it. The machine itself comes with a Core i7-6700 HQ processor that has a 2.6 gigahertz base clock on a quad core with hyperthreading, meaning 8 logical cores, and it also has a 3.5 gigahertz turbo clock. So if you are using something extremely intensive but only running on a single thread, it will bump from 2.6 to 3.5 gigahertz, assuming that there's sufficient power and cooling capacity to do so in the laptop. That processor comes paired with 8 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM because it is the latest and greatest Intel Haswell. It now supports DDR4. Awesome. You get a 4 gigabyte NVIDIA GTX 960 discrete graphics card. You also get an Intel HD 530 GPU, which is the onboard graphics card as part of the processor. It flips between the two graphics cards as needed using NVIDIA Optimus technology. So when you're sat on the desktop surfing, doing not a lot, Intel graphics, lower power consumption, better battery life. The second that you flip over to a game, boom, that NVIDIA card kicks in. It starts making a bit more noise. It needs the cooling. It's pumping out the frames per second. So it's a good system. NVIDIA have been using it for a good few years now in laptops. AMD have a similar offering. It's a win all round. And for your operating system and storage, you have a 128 gigabyte M2 SSD from Samsung, paired with a 1 gigabyte spinny HDD from Western Digital. The 1 terabyte is obviously where you're going to host most of your media, your music, your games, things like that. That 128 gig SSD is mainly for the operating system and some of the applications that you want to run super fast. Naturally, having an SSD of any type means that this machine has great day-to-day performance. When you power it up, it's very responsive, it boots up very quickly. It does all the things that you would expect a new laptop to do. Having 8 gigabytes of memory means that you can have a couple hundred tabs open on your browser. There's a lot of things that you can be doing on this machine at the same time, and it doesn't really break a sweat. Yeah, the day-to-day performance on it is really good. Okay, so I'm going to go into some of the features that I do like about this laptop and some of the things that I think that Lenovo could improve on. There's always positives, negatives. So in the positive space, I really like the design of this laptop. We had the Y50 some time ago. Lenovo have sort of stuck with that very aggressive black and red backlit keyboard. They've added some little flares onto it though, like on the WSAD keys, the red backlighting is more pronounced, so it's easier to find them when you glance down at the keyboard for when you're gaming. You know, the number lock and caps lock keys themselves, they've got their own little white LEDs that pop on so that you can still see that those keys are active even if the rest of the keyboard's backlit. There's a lot of soft touch rubber. I think that the keyboard is pretty darn good as well. Even with the sort of the one piece sort of chiclet keyboard that they've gone with, the key travel is not incredible, but it's still a very responsive keyboard. I think that the cooling system for this laptop is also really quite good. As you can see, it's not in the sort of slim and light category, so Lenovo have been able to fit a nice broad radiator on it with good cooling fins. What this means is when I was benchmarking this laptop, it was, really stress testing it. It topped out at about 65 degrees Celsius, didn't really go above that. That's pretty good for a laptop, actually. A lot of laptops I've seen either the graphics or the CPU creeping up into the 70s, 80s, even the 90s. So being able to sort of maintain a constant 65 degrees Celsius means that, you're not really going to have to worry about this thing pumping out lots of noise because the fans have got to put in extra work to get everything done. And also that your parts are going to last longer because they're running cooler, which means that they're not going to burn out as quickly. It's nice. I mean, it's something that takes years to happen with most laptops anyway, but just having that little bit of reassurance really, really goes some way. The other thing that I'm really a big fan of is the sound system. JBL powered audio. It's got a nice subwoofer on the bottom of it as well. It's not going to replace any kind of home theater system or anything like that. It's not even really going to replace a really good set of headphones. But for laptop audio, it is among the best I've heard. It's got really, really good sound reproduction for the size of the speakers. And it's pretty darn loud when you turn it up as well. So it's not bad all round. The build quality of this laptop, again, like the previous Lenovo that we reviewed, the build quality is top notch. They've improved a few pieces. You can actually remove the bottom cover of it now. I did have that off earlier, but unfortunately I butchered the video because I was sort of mumbling into the microphone. That didn't work out too well. But I've had a look, had a poke around on the inside of it. No warranty void stickers or anything like that. Good job, Lenovo. All right, things that I think they could improve on. First and foremost, and this is always a bit of a crushing one to say whenever you've got a gaming laptop, they could really do with improving the graphics card on this. The NVIDIA GTX 960 is not terrible, but for a gaming focused laptop, really you want to be sort of into the 965 or the 970s to really start to get a good high quality gaming experience on your machine. Now, the reason that I say that is because I have a laptop that has a 970 in it, and for a lot of the games that I play, I can play them on the panel's native 1080p resolution at around between 40 and 60 frames per second. With the Lenovo, for some of the games that I was testing and some of the games that I benchmarked against, that simply wasn't possible. Really intensive games like The Witcher 3 at 1080p on a high preset, I was lucky to get 12 frames per second with this. I had to dial that one right back to about sort of 720p to high settings to actually be able to sort of run a constant 35-40 frames per second. Some of the other games that I tested, GTA 5, I just stuck that on automatic at 1080p and it was able to pull out 40 frames per second on that. That was fine. Dragon Age Inquisition, again, stuck it on automatic 1080p. It was able to bump its way up to about 40 frames per second there. Thief, the 2014 release, or 2015, not sure which, the most recent one, that on 1080p on high to ultra, again, started dropping below 30 frames per second. To get a consistent 40 to 60 frames per second with high, I really had to pare the graphics back to 1600 by 900 or a lower 16 to 9 resolution. The other things that I had a bit of a problem with were the battery life on this laptop. It is okay. It is not incredible. When you pop the back off of this, you can see that they've actually not put a massive battery in that, and that's okay. You know, it's meant to be a gaming sort of workstation laptop, which means that you will probably spend most of your time on this machine with the power supply plugged in. That's not a problem. Finally, may sound a bit niggly and also maybe a little bit out there. 15-inch laptop should have some sort of either DVD drive bay or something that you can replace that DVD drive bay, whether it's an extra battery or a second hard drive or SSD or something like that. There's nothing on this. In fact, the only ports that it's really got, it's got a network Ethernet, so that's 1 gigabit. It's got two USB 3.0s, one HDMI socket. It's also got an SD card reader, a headphone microphone combo, and one USB 2.0 socket. So they could have done a little bit more in that space, I feel. Before I give my final verdict on this laptop, I'd just like to give you some of the benchmark scores that I got using 3D Mark Pro. On this laptop, I ran the full set of benchmarks that you get with 3D Mark, and they provide you with a score and some frames per second information and things like that. The score that I got for this laptop was on the Skydiver benchmark. I scored 12,283, yielding an average 60 frames per second on the combined test. Now, compare that to the GTX 970M, which I have in my own laptop, which comes in with a score of 17,128 and a combined 68 frames per second. And the 980 Ti that I have in my desktop, which comes in with a score of 25,960 and a combined 75 frames per second. They're all really good, and Skydiver is a good indicator of general purpose gaming graphics capabilities. So in that respect, this is good. It's got some really good results in that space. When you move up to Firestrike, which is the sort of the top end sort of gaming benchmark for these machines, the results start to spread themselves out a little bit further. So for Firestrike, I scored 4,028 points with an average of 8 frames per second. That sounds bad, but on my own 970M powered gaming laptop, I scored 6,499 with a combined average of about 13 frames per second. So there's maybe a 40% difference in performance between the 960 and the 970. And obviously with my 980 Ti, I scored 12,139 with an average of 32 frames per second. So that gives you an idea of where this sort of sits in that space. It's never going to replace, it's never going to replace a desktop graphics card, but then a desktop graphics card's about this big, and the laptop graphics card's about that big. It's small. It's fit for a portable machine, which really I'd rather hoik this around than try and lift my desktop. So that covers benchmarks. All right, I suppose the last thing left to do really is to give you my summary impressions and a score for this laptop. I think this Lenovo is an awesome workstation. I'm using the word workstation quite specifically because I don't think that this is a 100% gaming focused machine. It has a great processor, good memory, a great operating system, SSD, a sufficient data drive. It has a reasonable graphics card, and the battery life is acceptable. They could improve the graphics and the battery on this. Everything else about it, though, fits together really nicely. For me, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give this a 7. It is a good, solid choice for people who are not driven purely by frames per second, who want a good laptop that has many, many different capabilities. So with that in mind, I hope that you have enjoyed this review. This is the first technology piece for Empire Men, which means that naturally we are looking for your feedback. So please, please, please take the time to throw a like, a subscribe onto our YouTube channel. Feel free to drop in a comment. Ask me any questions if there's anything I've missed or anything that you've just sat through the last 15 minutes and gone, oh, why didn't you answer this question? Drop them into the comments. We will get back to you. And naturally, if you like what we're doing, feel free to comment about that as well. We hope to be able to bring you more technology reviews in the near future. But thanks so much for checking in. All right. See you around.